Welcome to Some Things Considered, the podcast where we are obsessed with story. We celebrate creativity and we talk to cool people to find out what makes them tick. I'm your host, Sean Murphy. I'm an author. I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University, and I run the nonprofit 1455 Lit Arts. For more about me and what I do, check out seanmurphy.net. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Some Things Considered. This is the podcast where we are obsessed with story, we celebrate creativity, and we talk to cool people to find out what makes them tick. I'm Sean Murphy. I am your host. I'm an author. I am the founder of 1455 Literary Arts, and I direct the Center for Story at Shenandoah University. So story is part and parcel to what I do, and I'm obsessed with it. And what I love to explore on this podcast is how story infiltrates so many different areas of life that we may not realize or think about. But there's always a special something when we actually are talking to creatives. And the best part of my job is I'm constantly having an opportunity to engage with unbelievably inspiring people. I am delighted to welcome back my friend Jeannine Ouellette, who I have talked to before. And I asked her to come back on so we could get an update on what she's doing. I think you're going to find her insights particularly inspiring and empowering. And you'll see why I consider her a real force in both the literary and artistic and spiritual environment. But let me give her a proper introduction. She is the author of the amazing memoir, The Part That Burns, which was part of the 1455 author series. And I'll make sure there's a link to that interview from 2021. She's also the author of the children's book, Mama Moon, and several educational titles. Her stories and essays have appeared widely, and her work has been supported by fellowships from the Malay Colony for the Arts and Brush Creek Foundation. She's the recipient of several awards, and her work has been praised by Joyce Carol Oates as simply powerful or simply beautiful, precisely imagined, poetically structured, compelling, and vivid. Here, I agree completely. A big fan of her memoir. She teaches creative writing. She's the founder and director of Elephant Rock, an independent creative writing program in Minneapolis. She earned her MFA in fiction from the Vermont College of Fine Arts and is working on her first novel, which I want to hear more about. Jeannine, welcome. It's great to see you again. And thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today.
It's great. I love the name of your podcast. I love that. It's great. Some Things Considered. That's super smart and apt. So yeah, thanks for having me here. It's really, it's great to be back.
Well, great. And, I think your bio, tells the story, but I think what is already clear and what will become clear as we talk is, as I said at the outset, I just consider you a very important person because you have such an obvious passion for advocacy and the teaching of writing. So you illustrate, by doing, and for most of us, for most mere mortals, that's a full-time occupation that takes a lot of dedication. But to be a real genuine encourager of the artistic field is something that we are in short supply of. And I think we can probably get right into, so everyone can understand what you've been up to lately. Let's talk about writing in the dark. I'll just tee it up by saying, I know that, and I think it's important for people to understand because you're probably going to be a little on the modest side. Endeavors like this seldom, if ever, just kind of crop up and say, I had this idea and I executed it and everything worked. There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of thought. And in your case, I think it's fair to say a whole lifetime of doing a lot of different things very well. And suddenly there was some real symmetry. But talk about this kind of new adventure you're on.
Cool. All right. Thanks. Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned in my bio, which it's fun sometimes to hear a bio, we're always having to send me a bio, send me a bio. And I've been here before. So you had a bio. It's a couple years old from when my book came out.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Elephant Rock, which is the creative writing program I founded back in 2012. It's really small. For most of those years, it was mostly me. Or as we say in my family now, we have my youngest adult child is adopting a little boy out of foster care. We call him Z. And we have an inside joke. We say, oh, only me, or only you, because that comes from Z. So it's a Z-ism. And so for a long time, Elephant Rock was only me.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years ago, we started bringing in teaching artists, under our umbrella and, or the platform. And which has been really cool and really a marvelous way to get to know other writers and teaching artists. And I'm going to get to your question in a minute. The reason I bring that up is that so this like teaching arm, this sort of tiny writing school, which was mostly in person pre-pandemic, and then of course became all virtual, and now is a little bit of both again, is going to become, as of tomorrow, I think the new websites will go live, but I'm changing the name to Writing in the Dark. Yeah, because it's like it didn't. Writing in the Dark, which you brought up, which for anybody who wants to know what it is, it's a newsletter. It's on Substack. But it's more than a newsletter. It was started as a newsletter. That's what I thought it was going to be, as a newsletter. And it is ultimately, at its heart center, I guess it is a newsletter because it comes out to your email inbox. But really it's a creative community. And so in Writing in the Dark, which started as a virtual workshop in April of 2020, that was sort of that's the genesis of all this. When the pandemic came down and Minnesota locked down and the rest of the country was locking down, and all of our things were wiped off the books. This happened to a lot of us. It was like, whoa, everything that I was going to do in 2020 just got canceled.
Right.
And so, I quickly thought, oh gosh, how am I going to get through this? How is everyone else going to get through this? And I put together a writing workshop, called it Writing in the Dark, taught it on Zoom, and have taught it ever since. But, about a year and a couple of months ago, started the Substack newsletter by the same name, thinking it was going to come out a couple times a week, maybe once a week, and talk a little bit about writing and a little bit about maybe some writing exercises. I had a vision for it, but it very quickly just grew to be so much more than I was expecting. People are coming together through the biggest surprise is that you can actually teach writing through of this virtual, in this digital way. Even though we do come together sometimes on Zoom and things, there are some special events, but mostly it's in the newsletter, forming community. And yeah, I'll stop there, but it's been really amazing. Our most recent writing intensive, I call them, that we're doing, and this is for subscribers. So there's a paid subscription option where you have access to all of the content. And so the intensives are for paid subscribers, and it's on embodied writing. It's called The Visceral Self. And last week's, we launched it with the first post came out of a 12-week series that we'll have on this. And there's more than 500 responses in the comments, and like people talking to each other and sharing their work and really taking up the task of this creative endeavor.
Well, congratulations, and we'll unpack a little bit more, because as I predicted, you're being modest. I mean, you're certainly answering the question, but we need to talk about the unbelievable success, and why I'm personally convinced none of this is by accident. It's the result of tremendous hard work. But I think what's really particularly relevant right now about your semi-recent trajectory is that you epitomize so many of the things that I've talked about, and people in our sphere talk about, when we talk about adapting to circumstance,
Mhm.
building and being part of a community, paying it forward, initiating discourse, being encouraging, putting yourself out there, being authentic. It's like all of these things that I think many authors or teachers struggle to maybe check a couple of those boxes. What Writing in the Dark has achieved, and it's because of the person involved in it, is it's an adaptation, which is, it just again underlines, like we had pandemic. Well, in that chaos for any creative, is there opportunity? And lest I start to sound like a big entrepreneurial business guy, which
Mhm.
is the last thing I am. But there is a truth, I think, to the notion of when uncertainty looms and there's chaos that's not expected, we need to make sure that we're healthy and safe. But there is usually opportunity in that. And what I think you've tapped into in your very organic way is that before, during, and after the pandemic, people are starving for community, especially creatives,
Mhm.
because it's often a very solitary endeavor. It's filled with rejection. And we don't, unless we're in an MFA, and even in those environments, it's fleeting. We don't have an engaged audience where we can give and take and support and have kind of a meaningful critique and support and all of these things that come with what we mean when we say community. So all of these elements are being addressed. And so I think what you've had is you're the right person at the right time with the right platform.
Mhm.
But in an era where we hear writers maybe cynically saying, you got to put it on Substack, everyone's got to have a Substack. And what
Mhm.
I tell people that bring that up is, why? What are you doing? What are you writing? And would
Mhm.
that not be best served as a blog? I think Substack is for writers that have content that is worth paying a premium for, or is worth subscribing to. You have that plus the teaching aspect. So let's talk a little bit about how you did build organically, obviously, through all of these endeavors. And the reason I'm belaboring that is because I just, both to celebrate you, but also for anyone that thinks like, well, she got lucky or that would never happen to me. I'm not saying you got to work for 20 years to build your platform, but just writing a novel, having any kind of publication breakthrough, having a Substack usually is the result of having put in a lot of time and having built trust with your
Mhm.
audience. But talk about what surprised you as you started kind of evolving your Substack. What happened right away that you were like, wow, this is working?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you. You're gonna have me leaving here feeling great. So thank you. And with regard to, I like what you said about that. Usually these things are a lot of hard work, and I like that you said usually, because not always. I mean, sometimes people have really lucky breaks, and other times people work really, really hard and they don't break through, and it doesn't work. And I think that's the difficult and the vulnerable and the heartbreaking truth about a creative path, is that there are the usuallys. And I like to, when I teach it, I'm the same with craft. I'm like, okay, these are the things that are conventions, and I like to know what they are, and I like to know if I'm breaking them, why, because I know I'm making it harder for myself. And I think, you've read my books, so you know that I certainly am willing to break conventions, but I want to do it with my eyes wide open, and say, I'm taking this risk for a good reason, and maybe it will stick, or maybe it won't.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so all that said, I'm glad you acknowledged, yeah, that generalism, that usually it takes a lot of hard work, and then there can be this like thing that can happen where you have the right idea in the right moment at the right time. I'm pretty easy to please, so I'm really happy, like with how this has all gone. And in some ways, for some people it might be kind of a small thing, but for me it's a big thing. So that's another thing I just will be transparent about. It's been a really big deal, the Writing in the Dark. And you also talked about entrepreneurism, and you didn't want it to be like, and this is, spot your opportunity and make a bunch of money, get rich quick, or whatever. And I know that that's not what we're talking about. And yet, when Minnesota locked down, I had a retreat on the books, Sean, where I had like a bunch of people's money in my bank account for an in-person retreat, my first ever international retreat in Mexico. And it was terrifying. I was like, what is going to happen? I've already paid all this money to this retreat center. I'm going to have to give everyone else their money back. What am I going to do? We're going to, all your fears. I'm sure a lot of people felt this way. It got really big. Like, we're going to go bankrupt, we're both going to lose our jobs, my husband and I, like, what is going to happen here? And coming from like my childhood background, a lot of like financial precarity and fear of,
Yeah.
financial
Yeah.
devastation, watching my mom lose her house and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's where I was at in March of 2020. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to look for the opportunity. And it was also very genuine. It was like, I'm scared. How will I keep writing? How will I, maintain creative community?
Mhm.
But I also was aware of like, I don't want to throw out throw out on social media, hey, I'm doing this workshop. It's $500. It was like $490 for 6 weeks was the original pricing on the Writing in the Dark Zoom virtual workshop,
Yep.
at a time when everyone else is super scared too. Like it felt
Right.
really tone deaf and like a shitty thing to do. So I was like, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll say, I'm going to teach this workshop and there's a sliding fee scale and it goes down to zero. So you just tell me what you can pay. And also, by the way, I don't want to hear why you need the sliding fee scale. Not important. Just let me know what you can pay. And it's an honor system. So if you can afford to pay full price, please do, because this is like how I'm supporting myself right now. And it was perfect. It worked perfect. If only everything were so easy.
Yep.
You know, there were people who paid zero. Almost no people paid zero. There were a few people over the years who paid zero. Most people, I would say probably actually the majority of people in the writing workshop have paid full price. And then, maybe somewhere between 25% and a third of people use the sliding fee scale. And so it has worked out perfectly well, where always felt like I was making, enough money that it was fair and
Yeah.
it was accessible. And I didn't have to do any extra work to make it accessible.
Yeah, listen, I'm trying to contain my exuberance because in addition to telling your story, which is so worth people hearing and kind of being informed by, you are obliterating what breeds cynicism, I think, in the literary field or the artistic, the arts in general, which is so many people view this as either a transactional enterprise or a zero-sum game, where whether it's financial or scratch my
Mm,
back and I'll scratch yours. And so many of these relationships are built on kind of these very non-genuine
mhm,
interactions. And what you're embodying and epitomizing is this notion of authenticity, honesty, and just this open exchange of that's what community is. I mean, I think some of us can try to build community with certain conditions, and that's fine. Not every community isn't for everyone else, but what you clearly have done is in my humble estimation, you're personifying the buzzwords. Your model is inclusive. Your model lacks pretension. Your model wants it to work. Your model is invested in every person having their best possible experience. So while I do want to celebrate how the hard work and your vision has paid off, I have to emphasize that this is really the result of um, how good people have good things happen. As you pointed out earlier, of course, that's not always the case. Good guys don't always finish last. Bad gals finish first. But in your case, there's so many of these things that are clicking. And to me, I think that's in an environment where we're just so taught, it's inculcated that like, what's the hack? What's the code I need to break to get a bestseller or to get a Substack that actually pays me some money? There's no code. There maybe are codes, but there's no shortcut, or very, as you pointed out, very seldom. And if you're going to bank on that shortcut, you're probably going to be disappointed.
you probably are going to be disappointed. It's frustrating to try to hack things. I'm sure there are hacks that work, but I am I'm almost like I have a way. I'm very passionate, and I have a kind of a core set of beliefs about teaching and about what works with teaching writing. And one of the things that your listeners may want to know is I've been teaching for a really long time because I was an elementary and middle school teacher before I left that field in 2010. So I was doing that for a decade, and then I left that field, and I'm at the university now where I also teach. But something about teaching elementary and middle school, it's different. It's like you're teacher first, writer second, for sure. Like I was still moonlighting and freelancing as a writer, but
Yeah.
no matter what the subject is, when you're teaching children like that, you're a generalist, and it's really about the teaching. It's not subject matter, it's teaching.
Yeah.
And I think that formed me. It really gave me when you are in a classroom, at least for me, it was really important, justice and ethics and how everyone felt, and how I could hold myself, kind of check myself and hold myself to certain standards in terms of the social fabric of the classroom, and were different people's needs getting met and so forth. And it formed, I do think it was very formative in terms of how I approach community when I'm teaching in a literary context. And what I've found, back to the newsletter, so launching the Substack, is that we are in a loneliness epidemic, as you didn't use that term, but we are, like the Surgeon General, what is it, 8 months ago now, or more, made that official.
Mm-hmm.
People of all ages, across all demographics and all income levels, and all socioeconomic and educational backgrounds, are really craving meaningful human connection. And so what I found, I wasn't expecting it, because it wasn't like what I had intentionally set out to do, but that it's just, if whatever I do, this is going to be a part of it. And so there I was on Substack, sort of like just doing, this is what I do. It's like, we're going to have community and interact in a certain way. And people really responded. And so, and what I mean by that, so I'm going to break it down, because I have had a few experiences where people were really generous and honest about like the things we don't usually talk about, and like money and earning a living, in the arts.
Yep.
And so I launched my newsletter in December of 2022 with a pretty defunct email list that, when you have a website, you can collect email addresses.
Yep.
It'll be like, sign up for my newsletter that I didn't have.
Right.
And then that would be like I could push out a blog through Squarespace if I had a retreat coming up or something, to let people know about. So that was the function of that. And so I did import that list of about 600 email addresses. But otherwise, I didn't have any pay. That was it. And just kind of hit the ground. But something happened right away that was super helpful, which is that I wrote a post called 11 Things. That's like the title of the post is like 11 urgent and possibly helpful things I've learned from reading thousands of manuscripts. Because I've been a developmental editor and also an acquiring editor in magazines and journals for a long time. And I had just come back from that Mexico retreat, which finally happened after being postponed for a couple of years for COVID. And I had read, I think there were 13, this was a revision retreat, and there were 13 manuscripts. So I came back just sort of like on fire with these patterns that I had seen all week, from being immersed in these manuscripts, and really for a couple of months, reading them in advance and preparing for the week with the writers. And my brain was exploding. So I thought I need to write this down. So I wrote a post of the 11 things, and Brevity picked it up. And then there was something in LitHub. And so that kind of helped to kind of get a little bit of, small time literary buzz around the Substack. But now today, so what are we like? December to December, then January, February, March. So, about 15 months or so in. And this is coming from I don't have a big platform. I'm just a writer, doing my thing over in the corner. I would joke with my husband, I'm just sitting on the couch with my laptop,
Right.
But we have 7,000 subscribers, which isn't like a huge number on Substack at all. But what's extraordinary is that more than 1,300 of those are paid subscribers. And so, that's like a gross annualized income of almost $80,000. And so I'm actually just going to say that out loud. Thanks. Because I mean, that's before Substack takes their cut. That's before Stripe. That's before, the people I have a couple of young people I pay to help me with some stuff. But I do think it's important when we can tell each other, like, this is what I'm doing, and this is what's happening, and this is how long it took, and this is what, because without specifics, anyway, I just wanted to say that because people have done that for me, and it's been really, really helpful.
So first of all, again, congratulations, but also I'm very glad. I was not necessarily going to bring up the specifics, but one of the things I was going to be at pains to point out today is, of course, there are so many aspects of our conversation that are relevant to maybe more inexperienced or aspiring writers and creatives. But I think the other side, and I come at this certainly from my own kind of purview as a writer and nonprofit director, but as
Mm.
someone that is on campus now and teaching students, I've been nurturing what I would call a radical ambivalence about MFAs. I've never been anti-MFA. I'm not anti-MFA now at all. But what I have been ambivalent and troubled about is that as college gets more and more expensive,
Mhm.
never mind an MFA, just an undergrad at a community college, but as these prices skyrocket, and for a variety of horrible reasons, the options are exceedingly limited and increasingly limited, whether that's to teach, to make a living as a writer,
That's
haha,
right.
or to even get an entry level job, with technology doing what it's doing and media consolidation. I think what you just brought up is completely important for mid-career author, professor, artsy types, because we are in this weird place right now that is still shaking out post-pandemic, but with AI and technology in general. Where does one go as even what we would call successful authors a generation ago are demonstrably making less?
Yeah.
The pie is shrinking. So
Yes.
when we talk about adapting, we talk about being creative in every sense of the word. What you're talking about, again, is not necessarily a prescription for anyone to follow, but it's proof that the world's changing. So we need to change, and there is opportunity out there. It's going to require a lot of effort, but
Mhm.
there are opportunities that we can carve out that don't necessarily reside in a classroom or on the bestseller list.
Yeah, I love that you said that because and it is like, so one of the things that I talk about in December of this past year, so December 23, when it
Mhm.
was my newsletter's 1 year anniversary, I wrote up, essentially, it was in part for myself, but I shared it publicly, and those posts went, like, what I always say, like, a little bit viral.
Mhm.
But I wrote up sort of like, what have I learned from this? And this was when I guess we were about a halfway, because it's growing faster now than it was before. It's got a little bit exponential. So that was where I was at about half of where I am right now back in December of
Mhm.
23. And I wanted to say, okay, so what's working? What have I done? Like, I really wrote it up. Where did I start? What have I done? And one of the things that I realized when I came away from writing what became a pretty big missive, I don't know, I had to break it into two posts because it was like more than 10 or 15 single space word document, pages.
Yeah.
But what I learned is that I know exactly what it is. Like, there's this thing that you can know, what do you have to give? What is it that you really have to bring to the conversation? And what do you have to offer to others that's of value? And that's not to say that that's going to be for everyone. We can just put that disclaimer out there right now. No one is for everyone. Everyone is a different flavor, but I know what I have to offer, and it is a very, it is my kids, like my daughter said right away, oh mom, that it's because it's you, and it's because I'm very devoted, very, my mom, or Billy says, oh mom, you will always hold someone's hand, so I'm very devoted and I'm very warm,
Yeah.
but I'm also very rigorous. And so this is sort of like was my claim to fame as a elementary and middle school teacher too. Like, my classroom was orderly and we had a way of doing things, but also I was really warm and devoted. Um, and I have just kind of remained in that space. And so the feedback from my subscribers is that the craft is extremely rigorous, that I'm bringing in and I don't want to sound like whatever boastful right now. I'm just really actually just describing how I know that I teach, which is high rigor, high expectation. Like I really believe everyone can improve their writing, 100%. I absolutely believe writing can be taught, and so I'm going to bring my 30 years of writing experience and craft to the table and share it with no holds barred. Like I'm going to give you everything I've got. But it's also a very warm space. It's a super emotionally safe space. I have very strong, passionate ideas about critique, most of which regard how unhelpful I think it is. So I have a very specific way that I approach any kind of feedback for people. And I do think feedback is necessary, but I think that the way that critique has been handled by and large in literary circles is really unhelpful. And so, because those beliefs create a very rigorous, safe space where people can take risks, they can experiment, they can try and try again, and they can do that, because like for me, the worst thing for any creative is to be trapped in a cycle where you're on rinse and repeat, where you're doing the same thing that you already know how to do because it's safe and you know that you can pull off that trick. And I'm not saying, of course, we're going to do the things we're good at. Of course, we're going to do the things that we've practiced and studied. But if we're not growing, we're not taking risks, then, we're not actually creating. That's not creative. We're not actually, we're going to burn out. We're going to get, dead inside. And I think that to wrap this thought, that also makes it a really safe space for beginners, because I believe that if the teaching in this school of thought that I live in is such that even the most experienced writer is really being constantly asked and encouraged to push out of their comfort zone and be at risk, be vulnerable. When I say that, I mean just be vulnerable in that you're trying something new, and you should be taking a chance that it's going to be a mess. And if even the most experienced writer is doing that, then the brand new writer feels a lot more comfortable and at home to say, really? Oh, well, then I guess it's this way for everyone. So I am, in the right place. Like I'm not, when I used to teach in-person retreats, people would email me and they would say, do you think I'm okay for this? Like, I don't want to hold anyone back, people would say. And it's so tender and thoughtful, but also so revelatory of like how we, like how scared we can be inside of putting ourselves in a creative environment and, being like the worst one. So my way of teaching is like, nobody's going to be the worst one, like that doesn't exist.
Right. So once again, I want to thank you not only for all of that, period, but I think what you're really conveying why it works for you. It's not a mystery. Why it's difficult, why it has to suit the individual. And it's like, bless you for creating that very safe space for people to be open and vulnerable, which is where so much of the good art comes from anyway. But I also have to kind of somewhat sardonically note that if you want to hear critiques of the MFA system and that maybe things that are changing, but kind of the outmoded, very patriarchal system, talk to an MFA graduate and hear them talk about the environment that takes place in the workshop with the critiques and the unbelievable cliques that exist and the favoritism and so forth. Again, not to say that any of that is not valuable, but I think what you're reminding us of is that I think it's like teaching in general. Of course, you want to teach the subject, you want the people to gain some proficiency. I mean, that's the ostensible purpose, but so much other important stuff goes into being in a teaching environment where you're riffing with other people, you're learning by hearing how other people approach their problems. This communal act is lifting up boats. And that's the stuff that I don't think gets articulated often enough when we talk about what's good teaching, what's a good workshop environment, how can people learn. And I also want to note, I love that you said, I believe writing can be taught, because that's another zero-sum game. Like, hey, kid, you're either born with it or not. First of all, how ridiculous that is.
Right.
And the other thing you touched on that I've talked about a bunch, and I'm always happy to invoke, there's nothing that I've found both inspiring and depressing is when I read authors I admire who have been in the game for a long time, and you read them and they'll say things almost always sound the same. And they'll say, I started on a new project. It's terrible. I don't know how to do this. I have to figure out how to write all over again. And I'm like, if somebody like Philip Roth or Joyce Carol Oates or whomever, John Updike is saying that, what hope is there for us mortals? But then I find inspiration in that because it's a reminder that we're all human.
Mhm.
Art is weird. And
Yeah.
if it was a formula that you could just follow, more people could do it. So it's empowering and it's terrifying. But
Yeah.
in that middle space, I think is where real creativity can occur.
And it wouldn't be art. Like it wouldn't be art if you could just know for sure you could do it again. It's
Right.
like you could use all of the same like craft and everything you've ever learned and then write another story and it doesn't work. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And it's that openness. And I just wanted to say that with regard to the whole MFA thing, I have an MFA, but the idea of a safe creative space, there is one distinction that I want to draw because I have mentioned rigor a couple of times, and I have also said I do believe in feedback, but I am honest. And if I say I have a writing exercise and I'm asking people to do a certain thing, and there's an endpoint in mind, and that's going to look really different for every writer, but there is something we're practicing, is how I like to look at it. We're practicing a certain thing, we're trying to get at something. And I am very honest. If someone shares something and it's not that thing, I'm going to say, oh, okay, this is cool. So it's not exactly what we were doing. What we're doing was this. And I point that out just by way of saying that I think there is also a difference between a rigorous teaching space that is safe. We're just going to start with that it should be
Yeah.
a creatively safe space where people are treated with respect and regard and care for their humanity and their creativity.
Right.
But it can also be honest, because otherwise, how can people learn?
Yeah.
So, um, and that differentiates it from just like just for fun, you know,
Yeah.
or just for like I guess just for fun is the easiest way to say it. There are cool things we can do creatively just for fun, and we can and should, in fact, and some things should be just for fun. But I feel very strongly that things should be honest. Things should be what they say they are. And
Yeah.
so if we describe something as a learning experience, like if we describe that this is what we're doing, we're say just for example, teaching,
Yeah.
then it should be that, and if we so just name things
Yeah.
and be clear about what they are and then adhere to that, and then people will trust you. And I am aware that if I don't do that, and this is from a lot of in-person and live teaching,
Mhm.
that when something happens in the room, some people may or may not be aware of it, but I am, and I know that if I don't rise up and address this, that I will erode the sacred trust that I have with people, and that's not okay with me.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate you underscoring the real disparity between a safe, happy place
Mhm.
where everything is off limits, and I think it's no mystery that in an environment where there's honesty and genuine feedback, I think you are going to lose the pretenders, which is fine. The reason that you've built and engaged with this growing audience is because I think on balance, most people want constructive feedback. Most people want to improve, want to see how they can do better. Obviously, and I think we've both agreed on the way that criticism and feedback is offered is critical, but I think most people are serious about the endeavor and appreciate having spent their time constructively. The people that are there to hopefully have their egos flattered, it's going to be a fleeting experience and they'll probably drift away. So I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's what builds the trust. And that's what makes it not a waste of everyone's time. And also, I'm going to belabor, this is one of the many reasons I really admire you, Jeannine, because I do think there are some professionals that would say, hey, look, I'm doing the best I can. Here are the rules. You paid, get out of it what you're going to get out of it. Like, it's so obvious that
Mm.
you're very invested in everyone having their best experience, and it's not one size fits all. And I'll say that people, just like writing can be taught, teaching can be, you get better. But I do think it's a testament to you. I don't think there are many teachers that really walk the walk and genuinely feel, if I'm not doing my job at a high level, how can I expect to get high level results? That's a real credit to you and what you've built.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I've often described myself as much teacher as writer. So sometimes, a lot of us as writers teach because that's how you support yourself. It's hard for most of us, for solely, if at all, the books and the writing to,
Yeah.
support us. And so, but I am also just by identity a teacher. But I will say that, we talk about like these words, constructive criticism or feedback. And like for me, what I've come to now, lo, these many years down the pike, is that it's just really not even about criticism. It's just like, what is it? Just like, and this is how I've come to this very pure approach to writing too, is just like, everything is just, it is just being very precise. Precision is key. So being precise about, what I've now seen a number of, the more I read, the more I see, oh, this phrase just keeps coming up, but the thing itself, what is the thing itself? And so if somebody is doing an exercise I've given and they've just done something else, it's like, oh, okay, well, you did this. It's just
Yeah.
naming it. Here's what you did. That's cool. Here's what we were doing. And so it actually takes the subjectivity out of it. And
Yeah.
it's not, is it good? Is it bad? That it's just, was it on purpose? Is that what you meant to do? Was that what you set out to do? Because for me too, there's like this, we can have our happy accidents, and then we can have the things like, I set out to create this effect,
Mhm.
and that was my intention. Did I do it? Did I do what I set out to do? Um, and I think when you can, and this isn't a shtick or something. It's not like well, if I say it this way, it will be less like,
Right.
harsh or something. It's not like that at all. It's like, that's actually how I'm trying to be in the world with my own craft too. It's like, what is it? And just, so it's genuine. It is like, I'm really looking at it saying, oh, okay, so that's something else. That's something would maybe we would call this that. Something came up in the comments the other day where someone was saying something about something that I said about plain language, and they were saying, I think I get it now. I get we were talking about like writerly cartwheels, the whole Elmore Leonard quote, if it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. And someone who's been kind of in the intensives for a while was like, oh, I get that now. I get it, And I was, and I think that's going to be so helpful to me. And I was like, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that. And also bear in mind that maximalism can be really cool, like maximalism when it's on purpose can be just this delightful, exotic experience on the page that
Right.
for the reader and the writer. And then I sent that writer a link to Brian Doyle's Joyous Validorus. Do you know that flash?
Mm-mm.
Oh, well, I'll send it to you after
Okay.
that.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's this ecstatic piece that's, about so-called the hummingbird, but really it's about what it means to be a human being and love and your heart, to live with a heart and have it break, and yet go on loving. It's a beautiful piece, and I consider it ecstatic and maximalist. And so in other words, I'm always wanting to undermine my own authority too. It's like to say, yeah, this is the thing that I'm looking at right now. This is the thing that we were aspiring to in this moment, but never think that that's the only way. It's just, did you do it on purpose? Is this what you meant to do?
Yeah. I think one of the things you're articulating so beautifully is you're helping creatives find and celebrate their own voice, which is part and parcel, right? I mean, successful writing, that's always going to be subjective. Is it, if it gets published, if it sells a certain amount, if it
Mm.
satisfies the writer? And I think we again live in an environment we probably always have in America, but like, what is hot now? Who do I
Mm.
imitate? How do I make this palatable? And the notion of finding one's own voice, I think we would probably both agree is if you're looking to do this, first of all, and I don't like to use the word pretender because that sounds a little pompous, but like the people that aren't in it for the right reasons, they're going to take care of themselves because as we talked about, it's so fraught with rejection and solitude. Like you're not going to stay in it without success for decades just because you want to punish yourself. So I do feel confident that the people that aren't meant to be writing probably won't stick with it, but the people that really want to and want to get better, I think what we teach them is when you're scratching that internal creative itch and you're writing in your own voice, whatever the end result is, if you're satisfying that motivation that made you want to pick up a pen in the first place, that's everything. A lot of the other stuff you'll find is gravy. It can be wonderful gravy. It can be sustaining and nourishing gravy. But if you're not day in and day out feeling like you're doing what you were uniquely put on this earth to do, it's probably going to feel a little hollow, and it's always going to feel like a hustle.
Yeah. And I think that, your when you talk about, when I listen to you, I think about a subset of writers who are on the path or wanting to be on the path to publication, and that is, that's you and that's me. And, and that's a lot of the writers that study with me. And but it's not all of them. Like it's also, there's this other, group of creative people who maybe they eventually will want to be on that path, or maybe they won't even, but they just want to learn a craft. Nobody is going to want to study with me for long if they're only interested, I will say the disclaimer, like that they're only interested in writing for self-expression. I would say that's probably like a subgroup of people who would feel like frustrated with my approach, because it definitely 100% recognize that what I'm doing is about making the writing better. But the reason for that is not necessarily so you can publish it, although if that's what you're trying to do, I'm all about it. That's what I'm trying to do. I like art to be an interaction and exchange, a human, this collective experience. That's what I'm in it for. But it could also be this idea that like as Toni Morrison said, in the tagline for Writing in the Dark is for people who do language, and it comes from her 1993 Nobel Prize acceptance speech, where she said that, we die, that may be the meaning of our lives, but we do language, and that may be the measure of our lives. And it's just a beautiful quote. And Wendell Berry said that it is our job as writers to make language capable of telling the truth again. And he said that, like, I think 10 years before Trump was elected, which I think that, that election only amplified exponentially the poignancy of what Barry said about language. And I think that also really, for me, spotlighted this thing I've always been interested in for a long time now, but this idea of like the precision of using language to look really closely at the world as it is, and to be able to express that with enough precision that it means more, than the sum of its parts. Because the older I get, I swear, the longer I do this, the more it becomes evident to me that it's all already there. The metaphors are right in front of us. We don't need any tricks of language. We just need to look more closely, say it more precisely, and it will just burst open on the page. But it will also burst open in our lives. Like, our lives are better. Our humanity is deepened and made richer. Our human experience is made richer by a practice of being able to, language, we make meaning with language. That's what we got. That's what we were given. That's what makes us different. And so if we can actually use that tool to be more curious, more precise, more observant, more attentive, and more, more connected to the world that we're living in and each other, that's going to change our lives. So somebody can follow my work in teaching and maybe not ever be looking to do the hustle, do the thing, get on Submittable, be sending their work out, be dealing with all the rejections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, looking for an agent, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people want that. They want to be in conversation as a writer with their work out in the world. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think there's benefit to that, even in this pretty challenging literary landscape that we're in right now. But we can also benefit from the study of craft just for the sake of being a better writer, because it makes our lives better. I'm a firm believer.
Here, here. I am too. Again, beautifully said. I think I think I feel like I had a pretty good handle on what you're all about, and I can articulate why I adore you. But I think what comes through this conversation so clearly and eloquently is that you care very deeply about words and language and craft, but you also care very deeply about human beings on a fundamental level, which obviously informs your teaching. But the confluence of those two genuinely held passions make a very potent combination, and in my estimation, a very rare combination. And again, you just dropped a whole lot of wisdom. But I think one of the things that kind of lodged in my head as you were talking was this kind of, I think, a reaffirmation that we can and should, of course, look to examples and guideposts, human and written, to figure out ways to learn and evolve. But the reality, I think, especially for writers, is we need to constantly be insatiably curious. And it's often a combination of a lot of different sources. I think for some people that's overwhelming, and maybe there's just too much work that goes into that. But to successfully navigate the creative path, learning from the different people and seeing what's worked for them, and test driving it and seeing, is this the type of work I want to do? Well, maybe I want to read more closely in this genre, or I want to do more of that or less of this. But again, I just think that also brings home that for most of us, unfortunately, there are no shortcuts, and there really is no kind of secret that some of us get to a fork in the road and we turn the key and it's all there. It's this constant process of learning. And again, I don't think I'm flattering you by saying you kind of epitomize that your personal journey has informed the creative and educational journey that you're on. And there's just this beautiful symbiosis between how you're growing and how your engagement with your audiences are growing. It's a wonderful thing to behold.
Well, I appreciate all of that. And I feel too that one of the wonderful things about writing is that, if you can read, and therefore write, you don't need anything else to do it.
Yep.
My husband and I took an outing on Saturday. My birthday's coming up, and we went over we have in Minneapolis this warehouse arts district where artists have their studios, and they have open Saturdays. So I thought, oh well, maybe we'll find something to put on the wall. Anyway, it's super fun looking through all the studios and all the things people are making, just it's very inspiring to me, human beings making art. But I also, said to my husband, gosh, it's just so this is so, it takes so much, like all the materials and supplies and the canvases and the paints and the metals and the, looms and everything, and renting studio space and everything. And writing is really accessible, as an art. It is available, you do have to be able to read to write, but otherwise, but there's storytelling, stories are available to all of us. Yeah. And I feel like this idea, the thing that's great about that is the accessibility. The thing that's challenging about it is that language, it's deceiving. And this is, I think, why Wendell Berry says, our job is to make it capable of telling the truth again. It's deceiving because look at us, we're we've probably used thousands and thousands of words just to talk to each other, in this conversation. Words they're too easy. And that ease, like, it's almost like it's too easy. And that ease can make us feel like we've made something, that we've used our creativity to make something when we have not. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
When we've not used our creativity, we have just said some version of a thing that we've said a million times before in different ways, or we've just put words together, we've spilled them out, which is, there's a place for that. I'm all about the shitty first draft and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But there is a different thing that's happening when we're making art with words. And it's, we don't have time, right, in this conversation to drill all the way down into what that means and what it feels like. But a big part of what I love to teach is what it feels like when you're doing that. And someone will come back and say, I have to tell you what happened when I was doing that. And here's what I felt. And I'm like, that. Make a note, put a pin in that, as the business people say. Remember that feeling. That's creativity. That's what it feels like to be in the unknown. That's what it feels like to have let down the guard and have entered into a state of uncertainty and be in a state of discovery. And now you were being creative. Now you were making something new. And we can't recreate, we can't do it again unless we can remember what it feels like. And then we'll know, oh, I'm in it. I'm doing it. I'm being creative. And it's like a feeling in the body, and people know it when they have it. And you can, that can be taught too. It actually can be taught, but people will tell me, oh, now I get it. That's what I haven't felt before. Like, that's it. Because language can be very deceptive. It's too familiar to us. It's too easy. It's too ready. It's too at the ready, which is what I love about it. If it hadn't been for that, I didn't have access to any other arts as a kid, like I wouldn't, I thank, the stars for the fact that words were free.
Yeah.
No paints, no paintbrushes, no dance classes, words were there and they were free to me. So like most things, there's the gift and the challenge of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we come to the end of an hour, and I feel like this was an excellent introduction. I feel like there's more wisdom to be dispensed. We didn't really get to talk about your craft and your writing. So with great enthusiasm and gratitude, I will simply say, I always enjoy talking to you. I want to welcome you back anytime, and we can continue, especially as things heat up. Speaking of truth and the value of words and communication, things are only going to get more intense. I think it would be wonderful to check in with you in a little bit and see where we both are as it relates to, using our words and our communities to battle words used poorly and with ill intent versus with good intent. But for today, you certainly have, reinvigorated, as always, this sense of possibility and reminder that, the stakes are high. It's our lives, but doing it with joy and finding your own way in an authentic formulation is its own reward. So I'm just so grateful, Jeannine, for you for kind of sharing your wisdom and your generosity. And I hope that people that are tuning in are super inspired. Final words from you, and please remind everyone how they can find you online.
Well, you can find me at JeannineOuellette.com and at writinginthedark.org and on Substack at Writing in the Dark. So, and then I'm on social media too, but I think those are the best places to find me because they have all the other links. And just want to thank you again. What a treat to get to come and talk about, these big ideas. And thanks for emphasizing the joy, because I think that it is really important. Why would we do this if we can't have some pleasure and joy in it, right? Why would we come back? Why are we going to come back to the page? And especially for those of us who are facing the challenges of the hustle and submittable and the rejections and the disappointments. There has to be some joy in it. That's the sustaining part. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you.
My pleasure. And again, I'll conclude by saying, Jeannine, as a teacher, as a writer, as an advocate, as a human being, you just fill me with inspiration. So thank you so much. And let's talk again, soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out Some Things Considered. This is the podcast where we are obsessed with creativity. We celebrate storytelling. To find out more, you can check it out at seanmurphy.net, 1455litarts.org. If you want to be a guest or spread the word, do so. Enjoy, go out, be safe, be creative, be kind, and we will see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to Some Things Considered. Find out more, including how to be a guest, at seanmurphy.net. Reminder, we are obsessed with story and celebrating creativity. Also, we're here to advocate for the arts by any means necessary. Drop us a line, get involved, and support our creatives who are the lifeblood of our culture. I'm Sean Murphy. See you on the next episode of Some Things Considered.